At the foundation of semiotic analysis is the idea of the sign. A sign is the most basic discrete unit of meaning, like an atom or a Lego block, but in terms of communication. From the perspective of semiotics, the world is composed of signs, and media texts are assemblages of signs that are combined together in order to make more complicated additive meanings. From this perspective, the media are cultural and technological forms dedicated to the rapid production, distribution, and consumption of signs, that is to say, of meaning. For now though, let's take a step back and think, what is this? If you answered, a cat, I'm afraid you're wrong, because it's not a cat. Not a real one at least. It's a picture of a cat, or, more importantly for us, the sign of a cat. Like all signs, in theory, this sign is composed of two parts, the signifier and the signified. I say in theory because in practice, both parts of the sign are inseparable, like the two sides of a sheet of paper which don't exist apart from one another. The signifier is the form, the physical trace of the sign. Anything that we can perceive using our senses can potentially function as a signifier. We therefore can have a linguistic signifier, an oral signifier, a visual signifier. There are multiple ways to signify something. In fact, a given concept can correspond to a wide range of signifiers. These can be highly abstract or very precise. They can be manipulated and changed, but still mean the same thing. That meaning is what we refer to as the signified. The signified is the content, the idea that informs the sign. I can't show you a signified in the same way I can show you a signifier, because a signified is just an idea. All the signs we've looked at so far share a common signified, a cat. But in order to make sense of signified, we need to work out what that common signified actually is. Or in other words, what is a cat? That's better, because we're not talking about any given cat. We're talking about the idea of a cat. Cat doesn't refer to any given animal, it refers to an idea, perhaps a set of ideas about a type, a sort of animal, an organising category in our heads that we have inherited from our culture. We have to learn these ideas because they don't just exist out there in the world. Signifieds are therefore cultural categories that we learn. So we've got signifieds, we've got signifiers. Now I want to think about how they're held together. The connection between the signifier and signified is the basic process of meaning, the connection of an idea to something in the world. In semiotics, we distinguish between two different levels of meaning a sign can convey. The first of these is denotation. Denotation is sometimes referred to as the literal meaning, the obvious, never questioned meaning of a sign. When considering denotation, signs can have a more or less arbitrary relation to their signified, which means there isn't necessarily any good reason why a certain signifier connects to a particular signified. The most arbitrary of these we call symbols. A word is an example of a symbol. There's no logical connection between the signifier and what it means. The least arbitrary signs we call icons, where the signifier appears to possess some of the properties of the thing represented. Such signs can seem natural and obvious, but we need to be aware of how systems of understanding aid our interpretation. For example, you might say this looks exactly like a cat, but it's only two-dimensional. That's a major difference from an actual three-dimensional cat, but one that we're accustomed to overlooking. But denotation doesn't account for everything a sign can mean, nor is it even the most interesting from our analytic perspective. For our purposes, we're more interested in the second level of meaning of a sign, what we call connotation. Connotation refers to the social, cultural, and political meanings that can accrue to a sign. In comparison to denotation, connotation is more lightly held and more obviously socially conditioned. It's one of the central sites at which the media works to construct and influence how we understand our world. A classic example of connotation is that a picture of a rose doesn't just mean a particular flower, it also carries a secondary meaning of love. Cat signs carry all sorts of connotations. They can be mysterious, lazy, sexy, or spooky, among many other associated meanings. Connotations are built up over time through the use of signs in particular contexts and texts, and we'll think more about how they work in practice in the next video.